Rev up your engines!
Scotty, why don't you make a video where you destroy the employee pricing scams that dealers use on their customers? Oh, they got so many scams. Yeah, and that's one of them. You get the same prices as employees, you know? I mean, they're not giving the employees that big of a deal anyways, and it's all BS because the price that they say is manufactured suggested list price means absolutely nothing. It's just a made-up figure. The only time they ever sell them at that is when they have a limited supply of a very popular new car. The Toyota Supras, which are actually BMWs anyways, they sell those at that price or above because they're only making a few of them and people want to get their hands on them, so they charge whatever they want. It reminds me when I was a kid and they sold albums. Yes, people got big albums and record vinyls and you put them on a turntable and listen to music, you know, real dinosaur technology. And they always had the list price and it would say list price, you know, $9.95, but for you it's only $3.95. Well, everybody paid $3.95 or less. All that stuff is just a gigantic scam. You can advertise whatever you want as long as you pay for the ads. The advertising companies will make an ad for anything you want them to say. They don't care, you know? You know, they say, you buy this car, look at the money you're saving. No, you're not. You're not saving any money. You're spending a bunch of money on a car. They might say, oh, look, you're saving on this. We're lowering this by baloney. You're paying a whole bunch of money for something, and the odds are it's probably not made that well either. Josh Merck asks, Scotty, I got a 2017 Toyota Corolla with 26,000 miles I leased and I have to return it in 7 months. I was thinking, should I buy it? Well, if you like it, sure, buy it. But you made a big mistake. Don't lease in the first place, just buy. Leasing is for crappy cars or if you have a business where you can write the entire lease off for tax purposes. Ages ago, one time, my parents leased a Toyota Corolla, then at the end of the lease, they bought it back. And they said, hey, it would have been much cheaper if they would have just bought the Corolla in the first place. They ended up buying it off lease, and they had it for years and years, and then gave it to my sister, and it outlasted her. She died, and the car's still rolling down the road. Yeah, they're great cars, but if you're going to get a good car, don't lease it, buy it. But let's say you got to have a Jaguar or a Mercedes. Definitely lease it. You'll lose less money that way. That's White 50306. Scotty, I got an '06 Honda Civic Hybrid, 160,000 miles maintained. One day I drove on the highway. It's just spun and it wouldn't go anywhere. And now it won't move anywhere. It starts and runs, but it won't move anywhere. One, I tell people, do not buy Honda hybrids, at least the older ones. The newer ones, they're going more towards the Toyota Prius design, which is a better design. But the older ones were a Honda specific design, and as they aged, they were crap. Your transmission system is obviously going out if the engine just spins and it doesn't go anywhere. If you got to replace that CVT transmission and that thing, you can just about forget spending that kind of money. It's too much. It's a 14-year-old Civic Hybrid. It's got very little residual value. I had a customer who actually was nuts about his, and he did that, and it cost him like $6,000. It's not worth putting it into that vehicle. If you want to take a chance, find a Honda hybrid mechanic, if you can even find one. Have him scan it and see what he says. And pray that it's some kind of electric glitch that it's going into freewheeling and he has to fix some electrical thing. But from my experience with those, it means the transmission's gone out and then you just say bye-bye because it's just too much money to put into something like that that's worth basically nothing. They have no value when they're 14 years old with 160,000 miles on them. Doubles 28 says, I got a 2003 Cadillac CTS with front brakes partially locked up. I replaced calipers, brakes, hoses, bled it out. You did all the logical things. The hoses could go bad, the calipers could stick on, the brake master cylinder could go bad, but you've replaced all those parts. Odds are you got a bad brake booster. The brake booster boosts the brakes, and sometimes when they break, when you release it, the booster doesn't release itself. So it's always putting a little bit of pressure on the master cylinder. It would be like you driving with your foot just barely touching the brake pedal, just enough to make it drag. I'm assuming that's your problem. I see that all the time. Now, if the ABS system has gone totally ballistic, it could theoretically do something like that. And I see that once in a while. But almost 99% of the time, you changed all those things and still doing it, it means that the brake booster is broken and it's boosting when it's not supposed to be boosting. So I check that and replace that. And you can get remanufactured ones. You don't have to buy the outrageously expensive Cadillac one for, $800-900, you can generally get rebuilt ones for $250 or something like that and save a bunch of money. They're simple devices. They're just a vacuum device that sucks air from the engine and uses that to boost the pressure. Silica 1994 Forever says, Scotty, is the 2016 and up Lexus RX 350 as reliable as the 2019 Lexus ES? Which should I go for? You know, you got to decide what you want first. You're talking about an SUV versus a car. Now, I personally like the cars. They're more fun to drive. They got plenty of room. I find the SUVs kind of cumbersome. They're pretty high up in the air. Realize you're going to get better gas mileage in the sedan versus what you're going to get in an SUV. They get worse gas mileage. You can often get a better price on a used sedan than the SUVs. The SUVs are extremely popular, so they charge more money and you have to pay more for them. They're both excellent vehicles, but just realize the SUV is a bigger, taller, heavier one, so worse gas mileage. They're going to wear out a little bit faster. I personally like the sedans myself. They're both well made, but you got to decide, what do you want? Do you want an SUV or you want a sedan? That's your decision. I can't make that one for you. Josh versus the Civic says, Scotty, my car seems to run better when it's super low on gas, and when I fill it up, it seems to drain the gas really fast. Some of that might be an illusion. Your fuel pump and your fuel pump sender that tells you how much fuel is in it is worn. It's going to look like you're going through more gas when it's full, because there's no logical reason that you're going to use more gas when a tank is full versus when a tank is low. So I'm assuming that your gas gauge isn't working right. It could be that you do need a new fuel pump assembly with the level gauge and the fuel pump itself. If it does run better when you're lower on gas, the only effect that gasoline has in your tank is the pressure it puts on the pump. And if you find it actually runs better when you're low on gas, odds are your fuel pump's going out. So I change the fuel pump assembly with the fuel sending unit to myself if I were you. That's the only thing that's really logical. If it actually is consistent and acts like that all the time. Just realize a lot of times there's coincidences in cars. I see it where some of you say, I changed the oil, then this happened to my car, and I said that had nothing to do with you changing the oil. It just broke at the same time. CSAN508 says, Scotty, I'm wondering if you could tell me, is it worth it to save a 2007 Scion TC5? It says rod knocking in it. I have a customer with the same exact car. He drives like an absolute maniac. And he got road rage. He revved his engine up so high because it was a standard transmission that he blew the engine and the rods were knocking. He got a used engine that had put in, and he's real happy with it. If you really like the car and you want to keep it, try to find a used engine that has lower mileage on it. A lot of those four-cylinder engines that are in those Scions are in Toyotas, so there's a whole bunch of them out there. If you can find one in a junkyard that's got low mileage, I would go that route. Now, I would not personally rebuild it because these days, hardly anybody knows how to correctly rebuild engines, and if you rebuild them, you really got to rebuild the whole thing. You can't say, oh, it's got rod knock, so I'll change the bearings and the rods and that'll fix it. No. If it had a problem, all kinds of internal damage probably occurred. You're better just putting another engine in, and if you can find a good used one like my customer did, he's real happy with this. Robin H. Scotty, do I need a scan tool to bleed brake systems when it's ABS equipped, or can I follow the normal two-person? Many of the modern cars, to bleed them correctly when they have anti-lock brake systems, you have to have a fancy scan tool. I got one of these $5,000 jobs, and it tells you what to do exactly. Push this, turn that. I mean, they give you all the directions. But it depends where the air is. Now, let's say you got an ABS car and you replaced the right front brake caliper. So you had to open the system. If you're real careful, you don't touch any of the other wheels. You keep the brake master cylinder full of fluid the whole time. You can just bleed that right front one in the normal fashion, and it could work perfectly fine. Now, if you ever get air in the system of an ABS system, and somehow the air gets into the ABS modulator assembly, no, you'd have to have one of these fancy computers. But if you're real careful, and you keep the brake fluid in the reservoir full while you're doing that work, and no air got in the system from the top, then the only air is going to be in the bottom where your caliper is, and yes, you can bleed it there that way. It's worth a try anytime you're working on them, because if it doesn't work, then you're going to have to pay a mechanic. As long as you don't get air going into that ABS modulator, you can usually get away with that. Luis Garcia 87 says, I got a Mazda 6 2008. When I turn on the AC, my car hesitated. It stops and it's kind of hard to start. It sure sounds like your air conditioning compressor is starting to go out. Take the belt off the air conditioner, then drive it, even if you only have to go around the block. And if it all stops, then you put the belt on and it comes back you know the AC compressor's going out. It's a classic sign of the AC compressor starting to go out. If you got one of those cars where, say, it's only got one belt and it runs everything, you can still take it off and drive the car around the block just to see. And if it's not stalling out anymore, you know the compressor's starting to lock up. They drag, and when they get really worn, they can drag a whole bunch, so it even makes the car hard to start because it just sticks on the whole time, and then when it's worn inside and it's stuck on, it's draining too much power from the engine. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.